What's up? This is Told the Scientist from the Nerd Podcast. The Nerd Podcast is an educational podcast discussing neuroscience topics. The purpose of this podcast is to learn different neuroscience topics and how neuroscience relates to your life or everyday living. Whether you're an expert in neuroscience or a beginner getting into the brain, have the nerve to stick around. Greetings and salutations to all who are listening. This is your favorite scientist, Told the Scientist, with Ray the Brain from the Nerve Podcast. On today's episode, I have a special guest of mine. I would consider this, a Neurobuddy of sorts. We've known each other, I guess, going on, 5 years now, I think? Yeah. So I'm not going to, it's been about 5-6 years. But I'm going to, I know you as Luis the Bear. That's why I have you in my contact name. But, tell the people who you are and, so they can get to know you.
Yeah. I'm Luis Martinetti. Everyone calls me Luis, but I have a twin brother also called Luis. So that just throws everything off. Yeah. So you can call me Enrique. My nickname is Quique. I'm Mexican-American. I grew up in El Paso, Texas, in the border city. And I came for my PhD here to MSU. With you.
Yeah, because I remember, our first interaction was Excitable Cells, but yes. I wasn't.
And that's why I was thinking, 5 or 6 years. In 6 years, we were taking Excitable Cells together. It was my first semester here.
Yeah, first semester. Yep. And, I was a postback. Yeah, that was that class, boy.
That class, boy. It's probably the best and hardest class I've had.
Yeah. Yeah. But so today's conversation, Luis, is one is going to be about your research. I think a lot of times, as graduate students or I guess doctoral candidates, because that's what you are, we, I guess, sometimes don't necessarily engage the public audience about the things that we do on, layman's terms. So today's conversation is just going to be about your research and how the general public can, view or appreciate your research for, the things that you do. Because, sometimes as a grad student, we're in different places, and sometimes we don't feel appreciated for the work that we do. So I'm using this platform to, highlight your work and, your successes, for the things that you have done. So I guess let's get to it.
Yeah, no, and I actually appreciate the invitation because I joined a couple programs this last year to try to engage my research and communicate to the public, but especially because my research is what you call basic science, and you're just in the weeds of it. What's this molecule? What's this gene? What's this and that? You try to show that to someone out there. Nah, it's not.
Yeah, I'm about to say, right? I can say brain, and people say, oh.
Yeah, no, right. So, right. So I really appreciate that. And, like you said, it's hard for us to, at least, if we don't seek it out, it's usually hard to, just send out or.
Yeah, just, have those conversations. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. So I guess, do you want me to just give a rundown of the research, or do you have more specific questions too?
So I guess the first question that I would have is, just tell us about, your research and what you do, and then I'll follow up with questions afterwards.
Yeah. So my research, just kidding. No, it's, so like I mentioned, I do this thing called basic research where we're not really focused on a specific disease or neurological disorder or something like that per se. We're just trying to understand the building blocks of the brain.
Absolutely.
So me particularly, I proposed multiple things, I guess for my whole PhD, but what I have been focusing more is called the cortico-thalamic system, and I'll elaborate for sure. Usually I focus in the communication between, it's called the neocortex. So usually in documentaries and in TV, you hear the neocortex is the most developed mammalian or part of the mammalian brain. That's what makes us humans and all that stuff, the most developed part. So that's what I study. Basically, the outermost part here.
So sorry, I guess we touched Ray here.
Oh, you got it.
But
hello, Ray.
Yeah, but the top of the neocortex is we understand that as the very superficial of the surface. But I guess is it a cutoff region? Do you go back here? Is that the neocortex, or is it more up here?
So
the cortex?
Do you mind if I grab it?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Ray. Yeah, go ahead. Don't break Ray. Oh no, it's all good.
All right, I'll just leave them there. Keep cool, Ray.
Yeah. The glasses broke. That's okay. Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, sorry. So the neocortex is this outermost part. It's basically if you would take the skull out, it's what you would see. You basically the neocortex is this entire part that you see here on the sides. You have the parietal lobe, frontal lobe, occipital lobe here in the back.
Yeah, the occipital lobe. Yeah,
Yeah,
for the people
where
to
it's
see. Yeah,
where it starts separating over here is in the cerebellum.
yeah, which
And
is this part right here.
exactly.
Yep. Okay, cerebellum.
green part,
Everybody
I
to see
think.
is the green part.
Yes.
Okay.
And you go under, and then you start having different kinds of parts as well. So it's basically the outermost part. It's also like you just see kind of if you see a brain, you just see kind of like jello and formations and sulci and gyri, which is like the grooves and stuff. But
Yep. All these like
exactly, you cannot like what it actually does. You cannot just it's not arbitrary. You know, it's a very high complexity area.
right.
And so more about the cortex. So it's organized in different layers, and each layer is thought to be involved in different kinds of like higher order processing. Usually what the...
So yeah, I guess the question for a higher order processing, does that refer to, I guess, I don't know, higher order processing with like different executive functions, like deciding what decisions you're going to make, or I guess maybe even walking? Yeah, can you be more specific
No,
about
exactly. So usually, and I'll digress a little bit, usually in the cortex you have the idea where a lot of the cortex is dedicated for sensory systems. The
Yeah.
idea is where the sensory information, say auditory, I'm looking at Ray, I see the veins and stuff, the sulci and everything. Everything is coming to my, first to my eyes, and then to my thalamus, and then to the cortex. And what we're seeing, I see like a complex figure and everything, right?
Right.
But what my cortex is actually dissecting is specific different lines at a very specific orientation, and basically all this information is coming in raw, and my brain is forming an interpretation, saying, okay, all these things are coming together, and now I have enough knowledge. I know that's a brain,
Right.
based on those features, right? So we have all our sensory modalities usually interpreted and processed in the cortex.
Okay.
Apart from, well, in rodents it's different, but
Right.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So basically, yeah. So sensory information comes into a cortex, and your brain, it's actually really cool, or the cortex, what it does, it kind of combines everything and forms memory, right? That's the big idea.
Yeah.
It forms memory, it forms knowledge, it forms basically interpretations that you've done in your life, all throughout your life.
Yeah.
And that's how you make decisions. That's what I mean with like higher order function, like executive function, based on, say, what you see, what the sensory incoming information is, you can decide what to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. And so
And
I
a lot of words, yeah. Sorry.
yeah. So I guess going back to your research, you say you're focused, I guess, more. I guess Ray, we're gonna take you apart just a little bit. So within your research, you study, I guess, would it be
Called it the cortical thalamic system.
the cortical thalamic system? So I guess
yeah.
here, I guess if you can see it, where would the cortical thalamic system, where would that be in this situation?
Right. So, and I'll go back a little bit first. In the cortex, I said it's organized in a very specific way. It also has layers.
Exactly.
And there are 2 layers that are thought to have cortical thalamic cells, or
Right.
the cortical thalamic system. I focus on one of them called layer 6. And here you don't see really the division of layers, because in humans apart, everything is kind of like rugged and stuff. But the layers, how they go from the top part 1 all the way through the bottom,
Right.
layer 6, and that's where you have like white matter, all the fibers crossing. I focus on the layer 6 cells going into the thalamus, which I think, this is, you have the thalamus there. So they basically go into the thalamus, and then that information gets relayed to other areas.
Right.
Or can control how we're interpreting sensory information coming through.
Sensory information coming through. So I guess sensory information, does that only pertain to what is it? I guess like how we touch things. Is that type of sensory information, or is it any other things that we're using the senses for, like taste or vision?
That's a very good question. So the idea of what we study is that if you study it in one, because you can only really study in one sensory system unless
Okay.
you're a big lab and
Yeah,
you have a lot of people.
You know how grad school. Yeah.
No, exactly. So I focus on the somatosensory system, and I use a mouse, which is a very good model for the somatosensory system. So I study touch. The idea is that all these principles can be translated to other sensory systems. So the idea is that that can happen with others. It's just there's also this thing where you have like a major sensory system. For example, humans, it's our eyes. For mice, it's their whiskers. So different organisms have different, I would say like different weights, if you will.
Yeah, like
on the sensory.
The sensory. Wow. So for you say humans, it's our eyes.
Our eyes, yeah.
Wow.
Our eyes, and we also do a lot with touching.
Yeah,
right?
I would have thought touch would have been like because I guess we're touchy. You know, humans are touchy. Yeah.
I mean, the thing is that we're always just trying to grab everything. You know, like we have our hands in.
Right, and we use it like playing video games or.
Yeah, that's what we say. Opposable thumbs. That's what separates us from everyone, right? That's already touch right there.
Right.
So.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
So, I guess even more context into your research. You were saying that you study the somatosensory system. So, for the people who don't know what that is, you know, how would you describe the somatosensory system? Ugh, I can't speak today.
No, you're good. Somatosensory. So somato usually translates to skin, sensory is senses.
Yeah.
So the same as you right now. The somatosensory system, at least let's just say in all organisms, it's the representation of your body basically in your brain. So there's this thing called the homunculus that they teach everyone.
Oh yeah,
right?
the homunculus, yeah.
It's like this weird proportionate looking dude with a big face, big hands and all that. It is the representate, I guess what's the good wording for that? It's a visual representation of how much of our brain is dedicated to that sense.
Right. So like for instance on the superficial top of the brain, like
in the cortex, usually.
Yeah, in the cortex. There's a part of the area that's like designated for like feet, or there's a part of the top of the brain that's like for hands.
Okay. So exactly. So you have, and you can also just Google like, sensory homunculus, for example, and it will give you a kind of like overlaid image of like the body parts along the brain, and it can tell. Usually, it's organized similarly in everyone.
Yeah.
Well, humans, and then it's different in other organisms, right?
Right.
But usually you do have that map, which is also really cool, I think.
Right.
Yeah. So
yeah, that is cool.
That's usually what we think of the somatosensory system. Also, it includes the ascending pathways, meaning from the receptors in your skin. It starts from the receptors in your skin, really. Also, the nerve fibers that are going through your arm, through your spinal cord,
right.
The limbical pathways. It goes into the brainstem. It goes into the thalamus, and then eventually in the cortex. That's where like all the crazy stuff happens, but there's a bunch of parts in the brain involved in the somatosensory system.
Absolutely. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. So, going back to your research now. Yeah, I would say, we can take these glasses off. Yeah, they're broken. I gotta, we'll
He's gotta keep his drip, man.
Yeah, he still drip, drip.
He's still working.
Yeah, still working, yeah. But I would ask for for your research. You're studying this somatosensory system within the context of a mouse. I guess the follow-up question is, a lot of times, a lot of researchers, we use these different models, I guess mouse models, I guess C. elegans or, rats. So I would ask, what's the similarities between humans and mice, which is, I guess, to make this research more translatable to our audience?
Right. I would say, at least in the cortex and just in sensory systems, we preserve a lot of the organization, if that makes sense. Usually, they're also mammals, right? So
right.
we preserve a lot of the anatomical organization, at least in sensory systems.
Right.
That's what I have understood from reading and all that stuff.
Right.
We can use mice. They also reproduce very actively, so we can experiment quickly.
Right.
We also cannot use humans. And
yeah, because you're researching. I don't know if any human subjects would sign up. Yeah.
Yeah, we cannot, not anymore at least. We cannot just go and poke and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Monkeys, it would usually the closer the organism to the human is would be the most ideal, right? But
right.
monkeys, it's also raises a lot of ethical issues, and it's it just increases in complexity and all that stuff.
Right.
So mice have been the leading model for decades now in terms of studying these sensory systems. And I would like to know more about the complete reasoning of why we use them, but that's what I have understood now.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Cool. So I would ask the follow-up question, like, I guess, could you map out the pathway? Because, you know, you start in layer 6. And so layer 6 within the cortex system is like sort of deep within the brain, like, I guess more inner within the brain, right? Closer to the thalamus, because the thalamus is like closer to the, you know, the center of the brain.
Center.
Right. So, yeah, I guess, how would you map out that pathway? Is it like, you know, there's neurons connected in layer 6 that's going to the thalamus, or is, what does that connection look like in the brain?
Right. So, you know how neurons are organized in a strange way where their cell body is somewhere and their dendrites and axons are just somewhere else, you know?
Right.
So, usually the idea is that the cell bodies of these neurons are located in this place called layer 6.
Yeah.
And the idea is about 70% who are the cortical thalamic cells that we call them, their cell bodies are there, but they project to the thalamus. So that's why you call them cortical thalamic.
Okay,
they're in the cortex and they project to the thalamus, right?
Yeah.
Their axons and, their dendrites project in different patterns within the cortex, but that's just a different thing. It's more like more specific processing areas or more specific processing of information.
Okay.
But yeah, usually, mainly what I'm studying, I think it's actually really cool. Like layer 6 cortical thalamic system, and usually these cortical anatomical organizations we've known for a minute. But what I am actually doing is, so apart from the sensory system, that we're trying to understand and all that, I'm trying to understand the communication between the motor cortex. So the motor cortex is more for executive planning.
Okay.
Or not executive. Well, I don't know, executive planning, but it's motor initiation. So motor planning. Sorry, not executive planning. Motor planning.
Okay.
And it's basically, it communicates, say, the motor plan, meaning what it is commanding the body to do.
Right. So I guess in a sense, like if I'm playing basketball, my body needs to plan to either pass or shoot or dribble the ball. So would that be considered?
Your motor cortex is saying, all right, shoot or dribble a little bit more.
Yeah, like crossover.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So what the motor cortex is doing is, it sends its facts to the body, right? But what it's also doing is communicating, say, that plan to the somatosensory system. Why? Because when you have a movement, you also, especially with humans that we are covered with things and all that, compared to any other organism that they don't wear clothes, right?
Right.
It's just a simple thing. Our movement also causes sensory inputs.
Okay.
Right? So I'm moving here, I'm touching this stuff, just any movement, or not any movement, but most movements that you're causing also create sensory information coming into you, and your motor cortex has to say, this is created by yourself, ignore that, and only focus on what is extrinsic per se, like outside things that you didn't generate.
Right.
If that makes any sense. So your brain is constantly communicating itself, or the cortex is constantly communicating itself. This is from us. This is from us. You're going to kind of shut down the sensory inputs coming here, and we're going to try to amplify to detect what is something that we didn't cause.
Okay.
So that communication, does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
So,
well, I mean, to me it does, but
yeah. So the communication, the communication between the motor cortex and layer 6 particularly, that's what I'm studying. And the idea is that these layer 6 cortical thalamic cells,
right,
they talk to the thalamus, right? But what they do is that they can basically shut down, or like they can say that to the thalamus, no, don't listen to that. And that sensory information is not going to come to your cortex.
Right.
Or they can say, hey, listen in. And they can increase the gain, if you will. Like they can open the gate a little more, and more of that information is going to come through. So we have seen studies and everything that this can happen, but we don't know exactly how it's doing it.
Yeah.
And this is what we call active sensation. Like we can adjust to momentary demands. We can, just live basically. And it's thought that the communication between the motor cortex and layer 6 somatosensory cortex is involved in that. So it's really cool. So
yeah,
it's the brain knows what it wants to focus on, but We don't know. Well, we know obviously, right? But it's very interesting, and it's strange as well that, yeah, it's just very strange.
Yeah, it's just strange. Yeah, absolutely. So I guess now, I guess the follow up question, you talk about like this activation, the thalamus. You're telling the thalamus to send the signals up, or you're telling the thalamus like, wait, chill out. You should do that. Yeah. So the neurons that are present there, are these the excitatory neurons that are causing the excitation to send it to the cortical, or is it like the I guess inhibitory neurons, or is the mechanisms even known at this point?
So yeah, that's where it gets crazy.
It gets cold.
Yeah. So there's and I'm not gonna get too deep in there, but the thalamus has this very, very unique, very precise and cool organization where the core, say that where the sensory information is coming through mainly, is all excitatory cells.
Yeah.
In humans. In mice, it's funky, of course.
Yeah.
But in humans, and there's this other area called the thalamic reticular nucleus, and it's all inhibitory, and it's a very precise communication that happens between them. So it depends on how fast the cells are talking. It depends on a million things. So it's not as easy circuitry. We're starting to understand it more now, but it is very, very complex as well. So
absolutely,
I think it depends on, I guess, coming back to your question, them controlling how information is sent through the thalamus depends a lot on, the, I guess, arousal of the subject. First of all,
okay,
arousal level. If you're like super aroused, or you're kind of like just chilling.
Just like sleeping. Yeah.
Sleeping is something completely different,
oh,
right?
Oh God.
Yeah. Also involves the corticothalamic system, but I don't know too much about it.
Right.
But sorry. So all this controlling of sensory information through the thalamus depends on the arousal state. It depends on the rate at which these cells are firing.
Okay.
It depends on what cells are being activated as well, and who they talk to within the thalamus. So it's not a clear question or clear answer.
It's not a clear.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to understand. Basically, yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. I feel like it probably wasn't a clear question, but
especially actually this question is the follow up to my PhD. Basically, what I would like to follow through.
Right.
And I do have a bunch of data now, but it's nothing that I'm gonna publish or like make a big part of my project.
Right, absolutely. So yeah, I guess that was gonna lead me to my next question is, what is the future step for your research? I guess one of it is like looking at, repeat it again, how the different cells within layer 6 are, communicating with each other, as well as, I guess maybe even included the thalamus reticular nucleus?
Thalamic reticular nucleus. So
okay.
Yeah, so we kind of know the organization of which layer 6 corticothalamic cells talk to which area in the TRN, the thalamic reticular nucleus, and the thalamus.
Yeah.
So basically, the next step is to start seeing how, or basically the physiology, how the activity of these cells is changing the activity in the thalamus. Basically, we know it does change it, but the way that we've studied those things is kind of like with bulk activation, or bulk, kind of like you activate hundreds of cells at the same time and then you study what's happening. That's not how it happens in the brain, right?
Right.
In the real world, it's couple cells happening or activating at the same time, very precise stuff. And the way that we study is just like, activate everything and see what happens. I would like to, the next step is basically would be activate very small amounts of cells, of layer 6 corticothalamic cells, and then record in the thalamus and see how things are changing there, or how things are responding, if you will.
Yeah.
So that's basically the next step.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I guess, one of the last things that I have for you, for you to make any suggestions, recommendations, or just, I guess, things to the general audience that they can, appreciate about the field of neuroscience, or, something that you just want to get off your chest in regards to the field of neuroscience. Because, I feel like the neuroscience field is it's an ever increasing field where it's like more people are getting more interested in the field of neuroscience. So the last thing is, do you have anything else you want to say? More of the story.
Well, now you mentioned getting things off our chest. I'm just kidding.
I thought you were about to buck up. Like, what's up?
take my shirt off real quick. The fight. No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, like you said, like it's an ever-growing field, and neuroscience I think is one of the newest fields within the life sciences.
Yeah.
Especially with the development of electrophysiology since late 1800s that we started understanding that neurons are actually a thing and not just like a net. Like it's a very new field, and it's bringing many people. It's getting very complex, very complicated, and all that. I think I would say to focus. But the thing with me, at least in my research, is that people just get too focused in the deep, in the weeds. It's just, you don't get your, like I was having trouble communicating a lot of these things because I don't tend to think that way.
Right.
And I would say that, yeah, I mean, it's important to know the very specific details of the research, but if we want to communicate that to the broad audience, to the general public, which is what science wants to do, right? We want to do the science and be able to apply it into the real world. We have to be also ambassadors in trying to communicate what we know. And I wasn't doing a very good job at it, I think, but I think newer students and newer generations have to be able to apply it and communicate in a sense to the real world, because also the words that we use in neuroscience and everything is somatosensory system, cortical limbic. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is and what it means, but usually the person out of what we do doesn't recognize it very well, so people tend to be, I think, intimidated sometimes as well.
Yeah.
When you talk about neuroscience or anything like that.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know. I think we need to communicate this to other people, and also the idea that everything is coming interdisciplinary. It just makes it easier for collaborations, easier for people to communicate and bring new ideas.
Absolutely.
So I think the next step that people have to do, and there's a bunch of people at MSU, at like AJ and Gina and a bunch of other professors that are trying to do these things and are very good at communication. I really would like for people to start adapting, I guess, those behaviors, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so bottom line, yeah.
Bottom line is people need to, become, well, one, we need to, focus on different perspectives as we're trying to answer questions in neuroscience. And then two, we have to, foster in that community of collaboration of different perspectives, because, that's how we, I guess, ultimately get to, I guess, the objective truth or the scientific truth as it pertains to the nervous system. So, yeah.
Oh, understanding everything, basically, right?
Yeah.
The objective truth, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I would say, Luis, thank you for your time today. It's really appreciative, as a Neurobuddy. It's very appreciative. But this is Tone the Scientist with Ray the Brain with Luis as well. See you until next time.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for listening. To stay up to date with us for the next episode, next event, or other neuroscience topics, you can follow us on Instagram at the DA Nerd Podcast. No spaces.